Okay, so where did I start? If all that David heard was what Nathan told him, that God said, no, you can't build a house. I have not asked you to build me a house, right? If that's all, then that would have really been a downer, because it's a good idea. David's got a wonderful idea. So it's the same. If we should not feel when we ask God, and we've got a good idea. I mean, we're not being selfish, right? It's really to honor God. We don't want any recognition. It's really to honor God. And he says no, right? We shouldn't feel either that God is just disregarding what we're saying. It's just not his plan for us. He has something else for us. He has something else in mind for us. Just like he told David through Nathan that he has more in mind for him rather than just building a temple. He was actually going to bless David beyond what he could even imagine. So, Jeanette, I'm going to have you start reading now. 2 Samuel verse 7, read all the way to 16. I'm sorry, verse 8. So 1 Samuel, chapter 7, verse 8 through 16. Now remember, God has told David, nope, I never asked you to build me no house. Okay, all right, now, so let's continue. It's starting verse 8.
Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty said. I took you from the pasture from tending the flock and appointed you ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off all your enemies before you. Now I will make your great. Now I will name great. Now I will make your name. Oh, now I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men on earth. And I will provide a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them so that they have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them anymore as they did at the beginning and have done ever since. The time I appointed leaders over my people Israel, I will also give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish your king. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with a flogging inflicted by human hands. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever.
Okay, so God told Nathan to tell David, no, he cannot build me a house, but I have something in mind for him, and I want to remind him where I brought him from, where he is now. He's done a good job. I commend you. I'm commending David for what he's done, and I blessed him. And he's a king. He's a place in where he is. He's united my nation. He's brought back the spiritual relevance. The Ark of the Covenant is there. That's great. He can't build a house for me, but he will have a legacy. Now, David's legacy was great because if you remember, if we go the way all that, he's also a forefather, a natural forefather, earthly forefather of Jesus. So he's leaving him a legacy. Now, what he's told him is, you can't. No, David, you can't build this. I'm going to build you a house, but you will have a legacy, and your son is going to build the house. Johnny, go to 2 Chronicles, chapter 6, verses 3 through 11. And let's see what happens. What has happened.
Then the king faced about and blessed all the assembly of Israel.
Oh, first of all, let me tell you what this is. This is at the death. Okay, Solomon builds a temple. He says you have a son to build a temple. Solomon builds the temple, and the temple is being dedicated. This is what Solomon says at the dedication of the temple. So now start. Yeah, 2 Chronicles 6:3-11.
Then the king faced about and blessed all the assemblies of Israel, while all the assemblies of Israel were standing. And he said, Blessed be the Lord, God of Israel, who spoke with his mouth to my father David, and has fulfilled it with his hand, saying, Since the day that I brought my people from the land of Egypt, I did not choose a city out of the tribes of Israel in which to build a house, that my name might be there. Or did I choose any man for a leader over my people Israel? But I have chosen Jerusalem, that my name might be there, and I have chosen David to be over my people Israel. Now it was in the heart of my father, David, to build a house, name of the Lord, God of Israel. But the Lord said to my father David, because it was in your heart to build a house for my name, you did well that it was in your heart. Nevertheless, you shall not build a house, but your son who shall be born to you, he shall build a house for my name. Then the Lord has fulfilled his word, which he spoke. For I have risen in the place of my father David, and sit on the throne of Israel, as the Lord promised, and have built a house for the name of the Lord, God of Israel. And I have been set, and there I have set the ark, which is the covenant of the Lord, he made with the sons of Israel.
Okay, all right. So David said, no. So God has told David, no, it's not you, but you're my guy, right? You're a guy after my own heart. You're my guy. So I am going to make sure, David, that you have a legacy that will last forever. As a matter of fact, one of your sons is going to build me a temple for the ark, a permanent place for the ark. You can't do it, but one of your sons is doing it. So God reminds David where he brought him from, that where he put him, and that he will have a legacy, and we just read how that came about. So we know that his son, he said, you're going to have a son to build him a house. We know that he has a son who builds the tabernacle for him and acknowledges, here's the point, acknowledges that God told David, acknowledges David's role in all of this. So that's the legacy. So if God says no to us, not that the idea might not be a good idea, may not be for us, but we will still have a legacy of what we have done while we're saved. Remember, we've got a reward coming too. Remember, right? Okay, so God said to David, essentially, look, I commend you for that thought. I commend you for being sensitive. I commend you for realizing the ark doesn't have a permanent place. I commend you that you want to build me a house. That's good, David. It's not my plan for you to do that. I commend you for the thought, but it's not my plan for you to do that. Doesn't mean that it wasn't a good thought. God did not punish David. God did not discipline David. God was not chastising David. He just said it's not for you to do. When God says no, it's not necessarily discipline or rejection. As Chuck Swindoll said, it may simply be a redirection. God has something for you to do, right? Maybe just not what you think that you want to do for him. So when God says no, it may just be that he is redirecting you. Also, don't worry. Now, remember, he shared this with Nathan, right? We may share our idea of a great idea with other people. And then God says, no, it doesn't happen. Right? Don't worry about what those people say, because you didn't accomplish what you said you wanted to do for God. Okay? So you may have this great idea. I want to do this, and God says, nope, you're not going to do this. And you shared it. You shared it with your partners, and they say, oh, man, you did not do it. What happened? You couldn't pull this off, right? They may ridicule you. They may say you didn't have enough faith. They may say God is punishing you. If you didn't do what was wrong, you could have got this done. It didn't happen. Move on. Forget it. Don't let what they think worry you. You know now that you pray from God. Because God redirected you to do something else. Right? No may not be rejection, but may be redirection. That's why we've got to look, we've got to seek God, and we need to seek Him every day, and we need to keep fresh our idea of wanting to do something, wanting to please God. Keep it fresh and ask God what it is you want Him to do. Don't get discouraged because God says no. Don't get discouraged because He says no to one thing. God does not call, in this case, the example, God doesn't call everybody to build a temple. They was not called to build a temple. Solomon was. They was not was. Remember, we've talked about this a number of times, that God gives spiritual gifts in the church. Yeah. Everybody has a role. The roles are different for everybody. Different people do different things. There are different roles, but God's purpose is to edify the church. In this instance, there was to be a place for the ark. It just wasn't David who actually constructed. Right? Now, he could support it. We'll talk about that later. He could support it, but he was not his to do it. If we have a thought and God says, no, don't do this, doesn't mean it's not a good idea, and somebody else does it, then we should support it. We should support what we want allowed to do. It's still a good idea, right? It's still a good idea, so support it. Let's read, John, let's go back to you. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 27 through 30. 1 Corinthians, New Testament. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 27 through 30. God didn't call everybody to build a temple. Doesn't call everybody to do the same thing. 1 Corinthians 12, 27 through 30.
Now, Jeremiah was the leader of the house of
Israel. No. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 7 through 30. What did it say? What did you say?
Now, Jeremiah was the leader of the house of Israel.
Is that 1 Corinthians?
No, sir.
Okay. It sounds like Chronicles. Yeah. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 27 through 30.
For even as the body,
Yes, yeah, right.
for even as the body is one, and yet has many members, and all the members of the body, though there are many, are one body, who also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and we were all made to drink of one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many. The foot should say, because I am not a hand, I am not a part of the body. It is not for this reason. Johnny,
go back, and look at 1 Corinthians chapter 12, which is correct. I mean, what you're reading is okay, it's applicable, but where I want to get is what's in 27 through 30. 27 through 30. No, that's okay, because it works. It still fits, but 27 through 30 is what I want. Because remember what I said, God doesn't call everybody to build a temple. He calls each one of us to certain roles. So 12 through 30. 27 through 30. Right.
Now you are Christ's body and individual members of it. And God has appointed in the church, first apostles, second prophets, third preachers, then miracles, then gifts of healing, help, administration, various kinds of tongues. Are all not apostles, are they? All are not prophets, are they? All are not teachers, are they? All are not workers of miracles, are they? All do not have the gift of healing, do they? All do not speak with tongues, do they? All do not interpret, do they? But honestly, desire the greater gift, I show you still more intimately. Okay, good. I like that translation. Where is that? What are you reading? Okay, I like that because what it asks, what it's asking the question is what we're saying. Are they? You know, everybody does have, so everybody has a role, right? Just like in this case, David's role was to unite the kingdom, to get this ark back to Jerusalem, to get everything set up. That was his role. Solomon's role is to build the temple. And he did. So everybody has a role, and it's all to honor God. God was honored in everything. God was honored in David's stuff, and God was honored in God's stuff. So what we should be thinking is God's long-term plan for us, and not get stuck on one idea, which may be a great idea, and God says it's not for you. Right? Don't get stuck. If God says it's not for you, don't get stuck on that, get hung up on it. Look at God's long-term plan for you. And that's what David did. Right? After Nathan told David God's answer, that his great idea that no, you cannot build a temple, but your son's going to build it. What David did was to help, right? Well, one, two things. Well, it did help. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later on. What David did was, if you read the rest of Samuel and in your Chronicles, what we'll read is David accumulated lumber, he accumulated stones, he accumulated gold, everything to be put in the temple. And some commentators believe actually David actually designed the temple. Right? He designed it, and he gave the design to Solomon to build the temple. And before he died, he told all the people, help my son build this temple. So David, after being said, no, this is not for you, David, your son's going to do it, David didn't stop. So for us, if we have a great idea and somebody else takes that idea and runs with it, what we ought to do is support it, because apparently God wants us to do something else. We need to honor God for that when things get, because God will clear it up. We ask God. God's going to make things clear, but He's got to clear it up for us. Now, David's case, we're running out of time, but I want to get to that point. But David did not pout when he was found. When he was told he could not build it. David did not go in the corner and sit down and pout. That's a good idea, God, but you won't let me do it.
I'm going to say, I'm just not going to do nothing. Right? I'm not going to, you wouldn't let me do this. I'm not going to do nothing. Just like your kids do, right? I'm not doing anything, right? Okay. David did not pout. So let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 7. We're going back to 7. And go read verses 18 through, I want to read the whole thing, 18 through 29.
And King David went in and sat before the Lord, and he said, Who am I, say, Lord? What is my family that you have brought me this far? And whereas this were not enough in your sight, servant, Lord, you have also spoken about the future of the house of your servant. And this decree, servant, Lord, is for mere humans. What more can David say to you? For you know your servant, Lord. For the sake of your word, according to your will, you have done this great thing and made it known to your servant. How great you are, servant, Lord. There is no one like you, and there is no God but you, as we have heard with our own ears. And who is like your people, Israel, the one nation on earth that God went out to redeem as a people for himself, to make a name for himself, and to perform a great, awesome wonders, by driving out the nations, their gods, from before your people, whom you have redeemed from Egypt. You have established your people, Israel, as your own, your very own forever. You, Lord, have become your God.
Stop for this second. Okay, so what David did, rather than pouting, he went back to God in prayer and said, thank you for bringing me where I am. You have really blessed me. You cleared it up for me now. Thank you for blessing me. Thank you. Now continue.
And now, Lord God, keep forever the promise you have made concerning your servant and his house. Do as you promised, so that your name will be great forever. Then the people will say, the Lord Almighty is God over Israel, and the house of your servant David will be established in your sight. Lord Almighty God of Israel, you have revealed this to your servant, saying, I will build a house for you, so your servant has found courage to pray this prayer to you. Servant Lord, you are God. Your covenant is trustworthy, and you have promised these good things to your servants. Now be pleased to bless the house of your servants, that it may continue forever in your sight. For you, servant Lord, have spoken, and with this your blessing, the house of your servants will be blessed forever.
Okay, so all right. So he thanks God for that, right? For him where he is, and then he says, so if we're seeking God, right, and he tells us what he wants us to do, what he's planning for us, then we should, like he said, okay, like when he started, keep your promise. God had said, here's the deal. You can't build a house, but here's the deal. I'm going to build a house for you. You're going to have this legacy. Somebody's going to be on the throne forever. We know that it ends up being Jesus. Somebody from your house is going to be on a throne forever. It's a great idea. It's a great idea. But David, because I love you, I'm going to build you up, right? And so David is saying, thank you for that. Thank you for telling me for that. And what he's saying is what did he say? He said, keep forever the promise. He wasn't, God had promised him that. And so he said, he wasn't reminding God of that. He was just saying, you promised, keep that forever now, and bless me. Continue to bless me. Continue to bless your servant. Thank you for clearing this up for me. I was disappointed, but thank you for clearing this up for me. When God says no, it's because he's got a better plan for you. He's got a better plan. And if we support his plan, that means we got to obey, right? We got to obey him. If he says no, here's what I want you to do, we got to obey him. To some people, he says yes. To some people, he says no. And he may do it to you. He may say yes for one thing and no for other things, and he says that because, especially your child, his answers are best. They may be surprising, but they are never wrong. Right? They're never wrong. So that's it. So we're going with the next chapter in the book next, which is actually I kind of read ahead. The next chapter is what? That's a good one. It's
David's victory.
Yes, David's victory, and so that'll be an interesting chapter next week that we'll get into next week. No, grace is a barren place is the next one. Grace is a barren place. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. So if you read in the book, we'll read verse 15 and chapters 15 and 16.
Oh, okay.
Now, the reason we're not going to spend a lot of time on 15, the grace is a barren place, when we studied grace, we studied David's when David went out looking for a relative of Jonathan, and he found Mephibosheth and brought him into the tabernacle. So that was an example of grace. When we studied grace, we spent a lot of time on that. But we're going to review that next week. Huh?
Chapter 15?
That's 16. Of your book, the David book.
Oh,
right. The book of David says grace is a barren place. But that's a really kind of a rehash of what we already studied in the book on grace. But I want you to read chapter 16, the gates of the open window shade, right? And so if you get, that'll give you a hint. An open window shade was when David was walking around at night and happened to see a beautiful woman naked bathing. Right? And what happened? But we'll talk about that next week. Next week. And the thing interesting about this is David was at fault, but so was Bathsheba.
Yeah.
She was out on her rooftop. Right? Okay. So we'll talk about that next. We'll talk about that. And how all of this works in God's providence. That's going to be amazing. Any prayer requests? Marlene, I talked to Marlene earlier. Marlene asked us to pray for the gentleman